Heart and Soul miniseries, Adventurelands, Part 13. I found myself gaping at that insanely powerful spell. I didn't know how anyone could muster that kind of magic on their first try. Oh, of course. It was max pressure. No wonder he already knew exactly what he was doing. He'd probably been practicing spell work since he could walk. I grumbled wordlessly as I aimed at the big dummy again. I carefully envisioned a powerful blast of pressure coming out of the end of my controller and flattening the dummy, just like Max had done to that insect. I replayed the image over and over in my head, and finally, focusing entirely on my dummy, I let my hand fly out in front of me as I firmly pressed the A button. To my great surprise and disappointment, nothing happened. A few seconds later, I saw a cat next to me fire off the same spell, but with wildly different results. Where mine had been a complete failure, her spell rushed out of the end of her controller, briefly taking the form of a massive cat running at top speed before it pounced and bit into the dummy, pushing it back as it chomped. I grumbled to myself a little bit again out of jealousy. Surprisingly, I heard her doing the same. I looked at her confused, wondering why she'd be growling when she'd at least cast the spell on her first try. Then, from right next to me on the other side, came an ear-shattering bark and a mighty gust of wind. The pressure was strong enough to make my hair whip around and hit me in the face. As I bent over to cover my ears, trying to spit the hair out of my mouth, Canine hurriedly stepped next to me and apologizing and asking if I was okay. As I stood back up, I did my best to assure him that I was fine. In a moment, he seemed to accept it before backing off. I could practically feel waves of jealousy slamming into me from my left side where Cat was standing. I found that very confusing. Couldn't figure out why someone would want to have their face whipped by their own hair and feel like their ears were bleeding. I had to wonder how she was so unaffected. All the felines I know of have very sensitive hearing and tend to be easily startled. I thought it was very nice of Canine to be concerned about something so minor. I wondered if that's how actual friends behave. I tied my hair back in a ponytail and took my stance once more. Aiming at the dummy yet again, I readied myself, pulled all the magic I could into my controller, and envisioned flattening the dummy. Then, once again, let my spell rip. And nothing happened. I tried it again and again, and still got nowhere. I tried more times than I could count, but nothing ever happened. I had no idea what I was doing wrong. I had heard how to do this 100 times. I knew I was doing everything correctly, but no matter what I did, it just didn't work. One by one, every other student in the class got it, knocking their dummies over one after the other. A few students had to work in pairs to knock over a single dummy, but because they couldn't do it alone. However, in time, everyone except me succeeded. No matter how many times I tried, I just couldn't produce even the tiniest bit of force. I wasn't sure where he'd come from or how long he'd been watching me, but when I could feel that I was almost entirely out of magic, Mr. Peralta spoke up to say, "It's okay. Some people can never master attack spells. But for all we know, tomorrow you'll produce an unparalleled shield. Some of the most sought-after PKers are exclusively shielding or healing mages. There are even PKers that are terrible with all kinds of magic, and even a few that can't use magic at all for various reasons. Some can only use enchanted items, but they do it so well that they may have better records than the most skilled mages. Don't worry, if you have any kind of skill, we'll find it. Then it's up to you to figure out how to use it." I was starting to like Mr. Peralta even more now, though having to hear that stuff about how I can't cast attack spells still hurt. It felt like a sliver of evil stuck in the most sensitive part of my foot. I hoped to be able to master every kind of magic right off the bat, just like the headmaster mom had. After all, I'd known all the spells and theories for most of my life already. I'd even been practicing envisioning my magic since I was a kid. Thanks to the headmaster mom's constant quizzes, every spell had been completely ingrained into me years ago. I couldn't forget them now if I tried. I just managed to hold on to hope that Mr. Peralta would be right, and that tomorrow I'd find my talent. When class ended, we headed for the dorms as a big group. Headmaster Mom and I lived next to them, though she'd always hated that house. Every headmaster had lived there since long before she'd been born.